Anyway, I've started the recording already.
Morning.
Let me also check a little bit on how many people do we have. 9 people. We're a lot more people accepted. Hello, Bruno. At this point, we have more people outside engineering than inside engineering, which is interesting.
That is because everybody in engineering knows already about it.
I hope that is 100% true. So, like I said earlier, and like I said in the invite as well, there won't be much time for questions during the moment. I'll also probably not see them, but I'll definitely take time afterwards. Even if we don't have time in this meeting, we'll can do it after that. I want to check a little bit, so I'm going to share my screen in this kind of way. Normally you should still be able to see it. And then the goal is to also that you can pinpoint yourself, that you see mostly this screen and not the others people. Trying to see if I can do that for everyone. I'm not sure if I can do that for everyone. But I think you can all do it yourself, taking yourself off or pinpointing someone else. So that you can mostly see this. Okay, I will start because there's a lot of slides that I have to talk about. Like I said, not much insight, not much time for questions during the presentation, and I've already started the recording so that we can actually have more people doing it. This is a presentation, as you can see, that was created by 2 Belgian friends of mine, Pascal van Kouwenbergen and Vera Peters, who actually started the whole Agile movement, or were a big part of the Agile movement in Belgium in the, I would say the late 90s and the early 2000s. So I was lucky that I was able to do that presentation together with both of them at multiple times, even at DevOps at some point. So multiple times, but I've changed it a little bit, and you will probably notice which things I did add related to here. So my goal for today is mostly to inspire you, to give some ideas, like I said, it started out in 1996, extreme programming. So it's not just something that started just last week and that people started to hear. Actually, for a very long time, extreme programming was the most known agile thing. And just to give an idea what that means, 1996, actually my own relationship started in 1996. So that's a picture of me that long ago. So you can see the distance or the changes of time that has done that with me, and probably also with extreme programming on some levels. The idea for this presentation is a little bit as a statement that my father said: you don't have to believe in the sea to get wet, but you do have to try to get in and try to learn about it. And when you get into that, you will learn more. So I hope that people will try out some of these things and will do with that. And when you try out a little bit, some of these things is a little bit like when you have a joint meal with a lot of friends, the more and the better food you bring, the better it will be for everyone. So this is the same thing with learning new technologies. The more you jump in, the more you try out, the more you will get out of that. So let's jump into that. Do you want to act extreme? Extreme, I'm not always liking the name, but it has a lot, and you can see this part of the slide. So let me move myself a little bit. Do you want our team to act in an extreme way? Like I said, I'm not sure I always like the name extreme programming. It has some advantages and disadvantages, but a lot of people like indeed some of the some of these things to do that. And what is also really important about extreme programming is it doesn't really tell you if a feature is worth starting. It will help you in many cases to give you tools to stop in time and when do we need to stop. The thing about should we work on a feature is more on a Scrum ways, is more on I would say, other teams and other people to work on that. All of this presentation is based on a full yeah, idea of Ken Beck about the XP loops, or some people call it the tree loops. I'm not going to go explain the whole everything here. I do have that document as a PDF I can send you as well. But basically, we'll talk about the different blocks. What is important for showing this is that you see that there is a relationship between all of these. And these work better if you combine a lot of these things. So some of the things you might think, hey, does it work or doesn't it work? It actually works better when we combine a lot of them. They actually support each other. In this presentation, you will see multiple different kind of things, talking a lot about practices, but also talking about values and principles. And sometimes a practice might not work, or we might think, hey, doesn't fit. Then it might be good to think about what are the values, what are the principles behind it, and see, can we do it in another way? But like with many things, don't try to change a practice before you actually have tried it and do it, because a lot of people they want to change some of the practices before even trying, thinking it won't fit, and actually when they try it, they see things work a lot better. One of the things we call it in Scrum, we call it a product owner. In extreme programming, we call it an on-site customer. And there, what extreme programming sits right from the beginning is a customer takes all the business decisions, and a customer trusts the developers to take technical decisions. Yeah? And we share our discussions, our decisions. We have that in a collaborative way. And that actually brings me, the practice is an on-site customer. You can call it in a different way, but the idea behind is collaboration. So this is really, we want to collaborate. We want to work together. Another thing that people might know that has been invented by people that started extreme programming is stories. And stories have a value, a price, and actually are a promise to talk. Stories, the idea right from the start was not to write a big documentation with everything included, but really we want something, or our customer wants something to be done, and we have a discussion about it to make sure both sides understand it. And like with everything that we do, it has a value and it has a price. In many companies, we talk much more about the price, which is the estimation, how long will it take? We don't always talk enough about the value. How much do we think it actually will bring? I know that Bruno is working really hard on having some of that, making work of that. The value behind it is communication. We want to have much more communication in all kind of things. So the idea, like I said, stories are to be told. Another practice is small releases. And with small releases, we want to have a time box. The idea also is that a release is a deployment candidate. It doesn't always mean that we'll install it with all our customers, but we want to go as small as possible. I think you've seen me already multiple times in discussions. Okay, what's the minimum version? How can we make it smaller? Because we want to test it. We want to see what's working, what can we release. And a little bit the thing behind it is that, can we actually predict the future? Yeah. Do we have a wizard on our team? And actually, sometimes I heard already discussions with the teams that it looks like we have wizards that think we can predict the future. Do we have a crystal ball? Can we predict it? Or, are we really seeing the future, or are we seeing what we want to see? So maybe it's not really seeing the future, but we think we can see the future. And actually, it's much better to release something and to try it out. The value and principles behind this, we want feedback and steering. It's much better to try it out at customer level and see, where are we? Are we going there in the right direction or not? And we might think that we're going right, but it might be actually a lot better if we look and install and see how things are working. Another thing that we're kind of using is the planning game. And with the planning game, we want to know how much value can we create in one release. So that is something that we want to try out. What's the minimum thing, or what's all the things that we can create in the next sprint. And the idea behind there is we want to deliver value early and often, yeah, as really as small as possible. In it's important to know that when XP started, the early was still, people were thinking somewhere between 1 week and 4 weeks. I think these days most companies settled on 2 weeks of things on delivering. But we want to do it, and this is an important one, in a sustainable pace. We're doing this for the long run. Yeah, this is why I don't like the word sprint in Scrum, because sprint gives the attention, the idea we have to sprint all the time, but you can't do 20 sprints one after the other. It's really, we want to have a steady, regular pace. Yeah? No student syndrome, no overtime, and we want to avoid Parkinson law. Student syndrome, the idea is that, okay, just before the exam, we cram a lot and we do a lot of stuff. And if we work for 6 months or 2 years to develop something, we'll do a lot in the last few hours or few days before it. We want to avoid that. And sustainable pace is important to know that it is sustainable for all involved. I've already seen it, and that was one of the main reasons why I like the picture of a Superman at on-site customer, because a good team will outperform their customer. In that sense, we're already good with having a product team, which is multiple people. But we need to, we know that when we use a lot of these things, we will outperform. So we definitely have to watch out for these things. The value behind is respect for people and respect for all people, not just the developers, not just the customers, for everyone who's involved. I think that's an important one. Daily stand-up, where I've adapted a little bit the 3 questions to the ones that I think is working really much better. The questions that we try to answer in the daily everyone is, what have I finished yesterday? What do I promise, or what do I want to finish today? And where do I need help with? And if you haven't been able to answer, I finished something yesterday and I won't be able to finish anything today, probably you will need help. This is not a blaming game. This is really from the team for the team. Where can we see each other? And this is the pictures, of course, from a physical team. We already know that if you're working remotely, it takes longer. We have statistics on that. But we want to become even better and seeing, can we focus? And maybe sometimes when we are having discussions, to postpone them to the end of the daily, so that we can still keep it focused. What is important in that is that last thing about asking for help. And I want to stress it out a little bit, because our ego typically thinks that successful people know everything, where in reality, that's not true. Usually successful people are much better at asking for help. We are in engineering, we are in, how would I say it, in an environment where we think that engineers need to know everything. Actually, the more we ask for help, the better we are at going forward. The daily and everything behind that, really the value and the principles are about taking smaller steps. How can we even make the steps smaller? Because we get feedback at maximum on a daily basis. We can still talk to each other, and hopefully we do in between, but the maximum time in between being stuck and asking teams for help and everything is on is 1 day. Another thing that you might have, and I know some people know this, is the truck number. And the truck number is about how many team members can we afford to lose. Unfortunately, this is the negative version. I personally prefer to call it the bus number. And then we can also have a positive version, which is how many team members can we afford that will go on holiday together, or that as a group go together somewhere. So that's a much more positive, and we do want to have that number as high as possible, so that we as a team, as a department, we are still able to function. So this is why I prefer to have bus number over truck number, but basically they both mean the same. Pair programming. It's a very important part of extreme programming, and I want to show a little bit some pictures of two people that did some pairing, because sometimes it's good. So what you see here is that very first discussion in the beginning of pairing, and then you see, okay, one of them grabs the keyboard, and you can see how dated these pictures are on the size of the monitor and also on the Microsoft Natural Keyboard that is there. But one of them is taking the lead, and then the other is taking the keyboard and things like that. So this is the swapping of doing it, and all of these pictures were actually taken in I think about 10-15 minutes, something like that. So it's really a discussion, and it might look here now that other person is laying back and then not paying attention, but actually the role here from the navigator is more think broadly at, okay, what could I help? What are other things that we need to do? And all of a sudden there is something like, okay, maybe we should also think about this, and how do we do that? In this is where the metaphor driver navigators doesn't really work, because of course in a car you don't swap steering wheels that quickly, but that's exactly what we're doing with pairing. And at the end, okay, we look at, okay, this is what we done, and are we happy with everything that we've done here? And they look at it and they say, okay, we're happy. So they quickly in a very short time frame are swapping back and forth of things. Now, what is some of the things that are important there? What we see, they have fun in learning. We have a lot, but we have a lot of data now. After more than 20 years, we have lots of data that actually the quality is way higher. It actually goes faster to develop things. It looks like from an efficiency point of view, we have two people spending time. So we think that it goes slower or is more expensive. There's money research that is done about that, and actually the research shows that the worst one shows that it's maximum like 1.2, so 120%, instead of just one person doing it. But because the quality is so much higher, that actually give much better end results in the end. And we have knowledge that is spreading much faster. So this is really the number one thing to spread knowledge. I've done workshops where in just a couple of hours where people were swapping pairs in between the workshop, we had knowledge that was very quickly spread to a bigger team. Yes, some people can't do it. Yeah, it's true. For some people, it's really hard. But actually, for most people, we need to learn it. Yeah, the first time that we sit together with another person, oh, it's like it's harder to do. So it is hard, but it's to learn. And I think this is one of the things where I said earlier on, you need to jump in, you need to try. I know that many people have already done it. When we're blocked, we kind of automatically ask for help and who can help out and look a little bit with me. And that is something we do, but actually we also see that there is data that proves that when we do work on boring tasks, that it actually helps as well, because the things you can do with your eyes, a lot of people say this part I can, or some people say I can program this with my eyes closed. I'm not sure how good the typist you are, but actually what we see is that the things that are the most boring parts is where we make mistakes that we don't realize because we're so used in developing something. And then that part, if we make a mistake there, it takes much longer to find the bugs because we think that part is so easy, there won't be any bugs. So it actually takes us longer. If you're doing it with two, you will have your person who's working with you who will actually see you typing the error mostly while you're doing it. And this is where the value is in that. Yes, you can do it remotely. This is a picture from Code With Me, which is one of the tools. I think it's from 2020 or something like that. That is doing. But I know that more than 10 tools already exist to actually share your screen in multiple kind of ways. So there's actually a lot more that you can do to do it also remote. And actually, quite a few people who had experience in doing pairing prefer these days to do remote pairing, because it allows you to see at the same time the screen and at the same time the code, which is actually something that is really hard if you're sitting next to a person, because you're not always looking aside to their faces. So it actually has some advantages of doing it remotely. The value behind is continuous learning. So like I said, it's about spreading knowledge, and actually it's called here pair programming, but we see a lot more pairing in lots of different things. I also see pair testing. I also see pair designing things. I see a lot of things. I think a lot of what Bruna and me sometimes do can be called pairing one way or another as well. And okay, we're working together doing it. Unit test. Unit tests are really written to tell us, does it still work? Does whatever I did before, does it work? It's a safety net. We're extreme, but we're not foolish. We really want, when we do things that are going fast and everything, that we do have a safety net. And so one of the questions I sometimes hear is, do I have to unit test everything? My answer is no, you don't have to unit test everything. You only have to unit test the things that you want to keep working. If you think it's not important that it works, then you don't have to unit test. The value behind is quality work. We want to have much more quality things in multiple things. There was two things about unit testing, and I separated them because extreme programming also brought in test-driven design, sometimes called test-driven development. I prefer to call it test-driven design. And so how it works is that we start writing a test, we run it, our test will fail, it's red. And so that is the first step in TDD. So, okay, what do? We implement the code, it's green, it's working. Yes, we even, if you do it in the correct way, we even commit immediately because it's a very small step and it does work. After that, the third step of TDD, what a lot of people forget, is that we refactor, we clean the code, it's still, so we retest it again, it still works, and we commit again. Again, very small steps that makes it easy to go back and to see things. Okay, we go for the next one. We implement a new, and so the idea is to implement the minimum of code, yeah, and it's really when you test it, it's the minimum of code that we want to implement, yeah. It's not the perfect way. This is really the core aspect of TDD that many people don't see. It's the minimum of code that we want to do, and then only do the refactoring. So splitting that up. You write a new test and it's green immediately. I've seen that. I've been bugged about it. That actually is a good thing to see. Okay, why is that the case? Yeah? Did my code actually implement more than I thought? So do I still need the test? Yes, no, that's a good discussion. Or it could be that my test is actually not good. And this is the main reason why we start writing with the test, because we want to test if our test is good. If I write a test and it's green right from the start, I probably wrote a bad test or a useless test. So that actually is a really important thing to do. Another tip that is good for people, oops, and I went too fast. When you start out with TDD is to avoid testing the implementation, because these are the tests that are typically breaking a lot. The idea is to test the behavior. What is the outcome I want to do? I'm not interested in the gory details at the inside of my code. And this is, again, one of the reasons why it's good to start with the test, because we start with the outside. What's the behavior that we want? And actually, that was a core aspect of why we moved to something that is now called behavior-driven development. I don't want to go too much into detail because it's not part of extreme programming. It was added or invented a lot later by Dan North, but it's actually going again to the core of TDD, right when it was invented, let's start the behavior, not the actual implementation. We want to do that for technical excellence. And I talked a little bit inside TDD about one aspect, and I want to go a little bit into detail about that. Is how do we clean technical debt? No, this is not my own kitchen. I know that Vera found it somewhere on the internet. I have no idea whose that is, but this is sometimes a situation that you have technical debt that is there. Now, there's multiple ways how to deal with that. The first one is one that I see a lot of people preferring, is that, okay, I want to suit up or hire an external team. I want to do a lot of work. We will clean up. Typically, like, okay, once a year, once every X months, whatever. We dive in completely suited up with the idea that we'll rework and everything. And typically what we need to do is we need to go to management and beg for a bag of money and time so that we can clean up the thing. What we've learned is that if when you do that, that's actually when we do that, but we don't learn how to keep things clean. Actually, what is way better is what is called refactoring, and that is keeping our code clean. That means that we keep the quality in every time, and this is why it's part of TDD. Also, every time we have something that is working, we have tests that prove that it's working. Then we take a little bit time to make things better, like removing duplication, removing code smells, a lot of things. But this is actually, and this is why I like the metaphor of cooking so much. It's while you're cooking, you're cleaning your kitchen and you keep it clean. And what you will notice is that people like Ron Jeffries and a few others who are very known for always doing pairing, they will tell, if I wrote some code and I didn't refactor, the next day I will notice it. Just like anyone who's used to work in a clean kitchen, if you come into your kitchen and you didn't clean up the day before, or you didn't clean up at the level that you're used to, you know it. Yeah, that's if you're so much good into refactoring as a whole team, you will know when your colleagues left it a little less nice the day before or the hour before. So that is why it's so important. Yeah, Eve, all very nice, but and so the idea is when something is broken, things get worse. So we want to fix it as soon as possible, which is called the broken window syndrome. And yeah, Eve, that's nice, but what if our code is like this and we have broken windows and technical debt everywhere? Because that's the typical reaction that I get from people when after 10 years of developing software, a lot of code looks like that we have a lot of broken windows. And then we want to ask for a bag of money to clean up everything. And actually, what we've learned over the years, that it's actually much better to every time we touch something, and this is called the scouting rule or the Boy Scouting rule. I prefer to call it the scouting rule, to say every time we touch something, we leave it better than we found it. Every single day, every time that we touch a method, we clean it up a little bit. We add a little test and we do some more about it. That actually works better than going in all suited up and cleaning up something and then not doing anything for another 6 months, and then we feel bad again and we're asking again for some money. If we as a whole team, everybody can clean up the small little things, we don't need to ask for money. We work on this function, we do it, and at the end, when we're done, we make it a little bit nicer. And we keep doing that. And I can promise you, after 3 months, we will already see that difference everywhere if everybody keeps doing it. The value behind it is really simplicity. We want our code to be as simple as possible, and we want to keep working on that. The next thing is continuous integration. Small steps, small changes. It also means small problems. So we want to continuously integrate everything we have, and integrating everything we have, that means all working on integrating on that same branch. So not having me working on my branch and then integrating the main branch. That's not integrating, because when Sergey or Tanya or Igor or Ludwig, anyone is working all on their own little thing, that's not all integrated continuously. And if you ask it to the people who invented this, they will tell you continuous is minimum once a day. We should have integrated everything that everybody is working on. And I know that at Amazon, at Google's of this world, they do it even much more. They do it multiple times an hour, even with thousands of developers. So the size is not even a difference. It's more the mindset and setting everything up so that we can do that. I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but it's worthwhile in doing that. Worthwhile because it means we are in control. Everything that is done somewhere, anywhere in the team, we all know about it and we see everything. And we notice very quickly if something is not integrating. When I started developing some code in the years 2000, at some point I was in charge. I think it was at Coca-Cola, in charge for collecting code from everywhere, and that was done once a week. And that integration was hell because it was a lot of work. Once we started setting things up that we can do it on a daily basis, the problems were much easier to deal with. So I felt much more in control. Collective code ownership. The idea is that everybody can change everything anytime, as long as we follow the rules. These days, it's actually a lot easier than it was in the early 2000s because we have Sneak, we have Sonar, we have lots of tools that can help out if we're not following the rules. Again, like I said earlier on, these things work together. If you have lots of unit testing, if you do a lot of pairing, all of these things work really well together. Because if people are new to a team, you want to know the rules. So if you do a lot of pairing, you know a lot of that. So I'm not saying we can implement all of that just at once. We just need to have these different things together. But the value behind it is really trust. We want to trust each other that we can do it, but trust with verification like Sonar and other kind of tools that will help us if we're not following these rules. So there's a lot of things there. We already talked about test. Well, there is another type of test, which is acceptance test. Because acceptance test, I told you we would have tools or things that will help us. When are we done? And acceptance tests really tell us, okay, we know that we're done because we have some things that tell us this is what we want the story to do, and we know what we implemented it. So it's working. Because in extreme programming and in Agile, we see working software as a measurement of progress. We don't see documents, we don't see checkboxes, oh, it's done. No, we want to have working software as a measure of progress, and even more preferable, working software as at client side. For that, another thing that is helping with it is velocity. Are we there yet? And this is manually created on a piece of paper. I know it says the red dots, but it's really the dots because this is black and white when I took a new copy of it. But it shows more or less the diagonal line shows where we should be after 2 weeks of work, and there we see, okay, this is the first few days we're right, and then a few days that we're going a little bit slower, and then we went a lot faster, and all of a sudden we have a few days that nothing happened, but we're still on track and we know more or less where we are. If you compare that to another sprint, there you see almost right away that this team is not going to make it because they're behind, and then they're not delivering anything, and then they go a little bit at the same speed, but still they're behind. Then again, a few days, nothing, and then again. So you actually, if you just look at that data, and I know that I had some conversations also with Albina. She's trying to show it also before we talked with me about, hey, where are we? This is something I've noticed that when we created it manually with a team, people were much more aware of where we were and what we were doing. But it has nothing to do with control from management. This is really one of these tools that is from the team, for the team. Where are we and how can we do? Another metaphor, another thing that we're talking inside extreme programming is open workspace. Now, when we work remote, we have to redefine some of these things, but still the idea, one team, one room, I think is still important. Um, the room might be more Slack or other kind of tools that we have, but the idea is that we can have open communication, that we can focus on a certain thing. And the value behind that is self-organizing teams. We want the team to figure it out ourselves. So one of the things where it's different, for example, where we're not there yet, is that people actually look at the backlog and they see like, okay, this is the next thing to pick it up, and I pick it up. So we don't pre-assign it at the beginning of the sprint. We just work in the order of priorities with the team and see who can help out and who can work on certain things. But we want to self-organize. One of the other things that is probably lesser known that it was part of extreme programming was metaphor. And I gave here the idea of one of the typical metaphors that I use a lot is team equals product. And what I mean with that is that if you have a problem in a product, you will typically see it in a team, and this scales at multiple levels. If you have two different departments not working together, it might be that the bosses don't get along, and this is creating a lot of friction. So because the team, for me, we also have a management team, and our product is the company. So we also see if we have problems at management team, we have a problem with the teams that are below it, and that's one of these different things. But metaphors can really be helpful, although we need to know what are our limitations and at what level they work or don't work. One of the things that is, or one of these values behind is really a shared vision. And shared vision for me is not a statement that we, sometimes you see shared vision statements that are created by upper management and are put on the wall as this is how we think as a global company. That usually, if you ask me, completely doesn't work. That's what I would call a shared vision statement. For me, shared vision is really much more um, basically, I don't know much about football, but it would be like two people playing football together and they don't even look at each other, but without looking at each other, one passes the ball to the other because he just knows that that person is there on the other side of the field because they have worked so much together. Shared vision is also people who are able to finish up each other's sentences because we know we're thinking in the same way. That doesn't mean that we always agree, that we always say the same thing, but we do understand the goal of where we want to go. And that is one of these things that we want to move on much more before. With that, I've talked about almost, well, everything that's been on that originally document. And like I said, there's multiple loops, they interact with each other. But something I've noticed later on, what was not on there, but it's actually very crucial to make it work in an extreme programming team, is a retrospective. And a retrospective is really, first of all, it's really important. In the beginning, when this was launched, this was sometimes called post-mortem. I really hate that. I don't like the idea of post-mortem because that means that somebody died, and I hope that that doesn't happen on our teams. It's really about not even our product that is dying, but it's really about, okay, improving ourselves. It's not about we're really bad. It's about how can we become better and basically prepare ourselves for that next release. And so the value behind that is continuous improvement. So that's a lot of values, that a lot of principles, that's a lot of practices that we do. And so, yeah, agility is really about all of these values and all of these principles. So again, I wanted to show agile in that kind of way. And so the typical question I get after that is, okay, where do I start? And my answer has been for, I think, about 20 years, you start with yourself, be a professional. And now, again, these are slides from Pascal and Vera, but I do stand behind it. It's like we want to work with ourselves, improving ourselves, and behaving as a professional. And so, one of these questions that we can have as a team, and okay, do I have an automated build? Do I have things that integrate everything and that tell me the reality of what it is? So, we automate the fully building of ourselves. We integrate it continuously. Do we do that? Do we have every day that everything is integrated? Do we have a unit test and do we do it for all functionality? Do we write tests first? Yeah. Do we first start to write? And again, some of these things are really hard to start with, and sometimes we need help and we need to learn it and to practice it. Do we continuously refactor? I know we have a lot of technical debt, but that doesn't keep us from trying to improve stuff. Do we know what our users want? Sometimes we don't know. We need to make sure that we talk enough with people from product. How are we? What do we have? Do we have acceptance tests? And I think we have a lot of them more manually. Can we move things more into automating? So basically, that question behind is: are we acting as a professional? Do we learn on ourselves? Because really, the responsibility for me is the first step to being an agile team. Everybody taking the responsibility at our level to learn, because for me, agile is really about thinking long term, and it's really what can we do at long term level to make it so every time we make a decision, even if we're fixing a small short term thing, can we fix it? Can we add one little step to the long term? And I was in, yeah, one of the things I see there is that people then sometimes say, yeah, but it's management or it's leadership. And for me, I wanted to add a little bit that for me, leadership, and that's actually is also inspired by something that Bruno said last week. Leadership is not about fixing problems, or I think Bruno said something like leadership is not about fishing, it is teaching people to fish. So it's also not about avoiding problems. It's really about teaching others how to fix problems. And I think we can do that at many levels. Sometimes I know we have a lot of people who really take on charge to solve some things, but sometimes it's also good to think, how can we take the next step so that another person can deal with it? And so to put that a little bit into it. So when I see somebody doing something, and that's a quote that actually came almost directly from Steve Jobs, who said, when I see something doing something not right, I try to think of what can I do to help, so that that person who's screwing up learns instead of me fixing that problem. And I think that's one of the things that is helpful in a lot of ways that we work in an extreme programming way. That is a lot of slides, very fast, because that's the last one. This is inspired by a lot of books that are out there, but that's very quickly a lot of things about extreme programming. I saw that there was lots of questions that came up already in the chat, but I didn't try to follow. I know that I think that Bruno added a lot of or answered some of these things. So let's bring me on screen and let's hear it if you have more questions or other things you wanted to talk about. Questions? I know I went really fast. No questions?
Sorry, has one.
Sergey.
For sure. How did you know, Ludwig? All right. Yeah, I'm wondering regarding policies that you can set up to be like more successful as a team. You're talking a lot about yeah, we need to look for improving like our processes where every once in a while doing the retrospectives. But I'm wondering more about the rules that you set up as a team. Is there any guideline on how to specify the policies that they also promote the improvement of the team?
Well, for me, well, you already mentioned retrospective. So retrospective is a nice example where we can actually say, well, maybe we see that we run into this, and I'm not going to say we need to decide this or that, but in retrospective, you as a team, you can decide on a certain thing, and then we can set up software like Sonar and other things to actually check, are we doing it? We already have that, for example, when we write new code already in the build, it tells us we need to have a minimum level of percentage of unit tests. It's dangerous to say we want things like 100% unit tests, because again, it might then go much more into detail about implementation than about behavior. But it's that kind of thing that we already have. I heard something, I'll go to you, Bruno, immediately. I heard something, and I think it was a joke, but I'm not 100% sure, but I heard something recently where people say, yeah, but we already know how to deal with some of that because we can turn off some of the rules of Sonar or not. And if you do that on an individual level, I think it's dangerous. If we do it as a team where we agree this rule doesn't make any sense, I'm totally fine by that. But then it's more we should be aware. If you just turn it off to make sure that your code passes, and then you turn it on again so that someone else will have more troubles in the future, then it's a bad thing. Did that answer your question?
Partially, yes. But Bruno has some remark.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruno.
Well, am I allowed to, Yves? Is it okay?
The presentation is over. You're allowed, but
You mentioned my name a few times, so that entitles me to.
Exactly.
No, one thing that I personally experienced that sometimes helps with Sergey's question is working agreements. So a team sometimes have a set of working agreements that they actually really write out on a piece of paper, and I even had a team who actually signed the paper. Maybe that's a bit too far going, but and the working agreements is a living document in the sense that the working agreement contains what you are focusing on at that moment. Like, for instance, if your branching strategy is lacking, you might add some things in the working agreements, like we do not accept as a team a branch that is opened or a pull request that is stands for longer than 2 days, for instance. I'm just saying that's a clear rule, and you agree that whenever something like this happens, it needs to be fixed within a day. It's a very clear agreement in the team. And then, of course, you have like the Scrum Master who will be paying attention to that, making sure that these rules are lived by the team, etc. So it evolves, because at some point in time, resolving pull requests within 2 days becomes a habit, and it's actually using space in your working agreement without being relevant anymore. And you just remove it and you replace it with a few other things. That's a practice that I've seen work in some teams, but it does require a team to get aligned on these working agreements, and it does require a disciplined team or a Scrum Master with a very sturdy hand, and I think we have one, by the way, for that.
Yeah, but this is, yeah, I fully agree. This is indeed, we need to agree on it. I didn't use the words working agreement, but that was what I had in mind. And then you can also have tools that can help out with doing that. And then you don't need a Scrum Master for the things that you can do. Anything a computer can check for you is much better than a person that can check. So that is much better. But some things are not. We're less good at doing these tests.
So such a document would be definitely separate from the process documentations, right? So like the process documentation would rather concentrate on how exactly is something happening, while such a document, the work agreement, will be extracting all of these, the intentions of these processes, right?
For me, it feels like a semantic discussion. I think they're related, and they work hand in hand together. You don't want to write on piece of paper. For example, you might say we were going to do pairing, and then you can point out to another document that says actually what does that mean. we're going to do unit tests. What does that mean? That can help out. Sometimes we don't need to write it out because everybody knows it, and then we don't need it. But of course, you want to avoid, like Bruno said, that if you want to sign it or if you do it in a digital way, you want to avoid that that becomes way too long. You should be able to read it in like 4 or 5 minutes and fully have an understanding what is there. One of the problems I see when people start out with working agreements, that they add way too much. I prefer you add one line and you 100% do it all the time, and then you add a second line. Because we typically start out, or what I've seen many teams is we start out with 20 of these things and we do none of them, but we're almost there. Don't do that. Just have one thing that you do it 100%, and once you're there, you can go for the next steps.
Yeah.
If you want more, let's take that offline. I want to see if there's other questions, because I don't want to focus everything on just one question. Who else has questions? Who has done some of the things that we're talking about here, or that I talked about here? Usman, as in yes, I've done it, or as in I have a question?
As in yes, I've done it before. Yeah.
Could you explain, because you're one of the people who are rather new in our company, could you explain a little bit how you did it? What's your experience in doing some of this stuff? Or what did you do? Let's start with that.
Pair programming is something that nowadays we learn a lot about in school as well. So during the school period, we had like multiple workshops also about it, about learning to pair program, learning to plan first as well, and then see, like, compare how the code compares to when you do it alone. And also when I first joined Exalate, Seri and I actually had a few sessions together like that as well. It's also a good way to learn, in my experience. When you have someone much more experienced near you to also mentor you in like pair programming session is very important. And then another thing as well, I also had a workshop on test-driven development before, and it's little time-consuming maybe, but it's very efficient, like very future-proof for creating robust code. So it's also big upside as well. Those are my experiences.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to learn more after. Let's take that offline, from who you had some of the workshops at university, because I've been involved with lots of high school and universities in Belgium, and I want to learn more about what's happening there. But that's take that offline. Anyone else?
Yes, I have a doubt. It looks like extreme programming is a bunch of practices combined, and the underlying idea is that we do small things, make it like a robust, and if something goes wrong, we can fix it like quickly. So is this the idea correct?
I think so, yeah. The idea is indeed to do things much smaller, and then the problems are much smaller, and
I see.
Again, with
Okay.
a lot of stuff that we're doing it around it, because, for example, if you have, I think we have about just a little less than 3,000 unit tests. I've worked with teams that had more than 20,000 unit tests, and if I make a small change and I commit it immediately, it would tell me that I broke 300 things. Then I know that, okay, I thought it was a small change, not making any problem, and now all of a sudden I've broken 300 things. That tells me a lot. A lot of that is supporting each other. What was your question behind that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand the things we talk about, like principles and values, and it covers like a lot of things, like from like the team structure maybe, or how they communicate, from to the actual practice as well. So practice of developing software. It combines a lot of things. So let's say we are initiating this is in Exalate, that we will going to do extreme programming. So so for me, like as a developer, TDD makes sense to start on my own, like while developing a feature. Pair programming makes sense to like collaborate with my teammate. So what other things, like other than developer, that other people are involved to make it like at the stage of extreme programming, that I can say that, okay, we in our company we're following extreme programming? Is it something like that, or I misunderstood something?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Yeah, please say more. Or maybe you
okay.
understood, but I didn't.
Bruno, did you get it? Or
Well, I think you are asking for what are the basic practices that you should be applying to be able to start calling yourself an extreme programming team. Is it something like that?
right?
Yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
specifically aimed at our current actual situation. We as an Exalate team, when can we start
Yes.
calling ourselves an extreme programming team?
Right.
Something in
Yes.
that nature. And what would be our first steps concretely?
Right. Yes. Thank you, Bruno.
I'm not even sure. Yeah, for me, I'm not so much interested in the stamp we're doing extreme programming in that sense. It's I want us to become better, and we have, this is like I showed at the end, there's a lot of books about it, but typically this is just what a lot of people done, or some people have done over the years. And for example, what is not in there, but what is currently in the extreme programming world, but I thought about it, but on purposely I didn't add it. But a lot of people now would say we're no longer pairing, we do ensemble or team programming. So basically, we're working and developing as a full team together. We're no longer pairing, but we actually have multiple teams involved. And so is that then still called extreme programming or not? It's a very semantic discussion. What I would say is indeed calling yourself that you're doing that and you're not doing pairing or you're not doing unit tests or TDD, then that would not be right. But I don't, I hope if in a couple of years, in 2 or 3 years, that we can say, okay, we develop in the Exalate way of working and we have some kind of, I don't know if it's a manual or some kind of way that we describe what does it mean if you work at Exalate. Well, it means you do this and that and that. And at this moment, I would say a lot of the practices that are here will be able to go help us further. And I can imagine in a few months that we might find things that are even better. We will drop some of these and or we just add stuff to that. That is for me much more. So yes, I'm a big fan of extreme programming because I've seen it help in a lot of companies. I've almost every time just for myself, when I started it, I had a hard time believing in, well, there was a lot of things that I totally didn't believe in. But then like I said in the beginning, I jumped in and I tried out and I discovered that actually a lot more worked than I thought would work. And that's why I'm asking people, try it out and indeed ask for help. This is also why we're looking for persons, and I think you have to watch out because you have an interview in a few minutes. We're interviewing people that can actually help out, that have done that, to help us to go to that next step. I think that is more important than the exactly rubber stamp or whatever that we are extreme programming wise. I noticed that a lot of people who invented that don't even call themselves that way. So yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Now, to be fair, Ludwig, if you would start working with, let's say, a certain amount of your time out of TDD, I mean, whatever starting point is a fantastic starting point. Any starting point is a good starting point because then you're starting it.
Right.
So
yes.
I would, like, if in 2 weeks you would tell me, Bruno, I did a bit of development and I actually did TDD on it, man, you just moved forward, you tried it out, and so anything you experiment, anything you try out is a step forward.
Yeah, actually, okay. Last thing, I gotta go. But yeah, we already started. I already started it with this GUI 4 thingy. First, I wrote down the test. It was failing, and then I tried to make it fake. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Right.
Other questions? I can still stay here for questions, but technically the time is over. I will also stop the recording. So maybe some people maybe prefer to ask questions without the recording.
It's not about